So Avatar: The Last Airbender premiered on Netflix, making this the second live-action adaptation of the original show, the first one being the M. Night Shyamalan movie from 2010. And after watching the season myself, I can say that while not being as good as the original, it's not as bad as the 2010 movie, which I realize isn't saying much. But it's fine. I personally wouldn't recommend this over the original. But pretty much everything I was concerned about going into it happened. They condensed the first season along with elements from The Legend of Korra and the second season, all into 8 episodes. And because of that, a lot has to get cut. For example, Katara's necklace was a pretty important item in the original series, but here it's never brought up in any significant manner. It's just an accessory she wears. And as was reported on before, they removed the sexist aspects of Sokka's character in the early episodes, which in my opinion does take away from his character development, but they did keep the sexism from the Northern Water Tribe, and the necklace ended up playing a pretty big role in that storyline, but it wasn't brought up here at all. Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of those shows that I think really doesn't need a remake. It still holds up even 20 years later, and I'm not sure if a remake can really add anything new to the series. I don't think it's a good idea for remakes to be a carbon copy of the original, but it could be interesting to see these characters in this world in a different medium. But in my opinion, it didn't really do anything innovative with these concepts, and maybe even did things not as good as the original did. Like, I don't care for what they did with Boomy. In the show, he's kooky and eccentric, but also very wise. He teaches Aang some valuable lessons, and he never really lets anything control him, even when he's captured by the Fire Nation. But here he's cynical and bitter. He's very resentful towards Aang. He just doesn't seem like the kind of guy that Aang would name his son after. Avatar Roku also had a limited role in the series. They did give more spotlight to the other avatars, which is cool, but at the same time I think limiting Roku was a mistake. Not only is Roku the previous avatar, but he also has a direct connection to this conflict, which made him a really important perspective, and a really good guide to Aang, and I think there's a lot missing because of it. One of the biggest problems I have with this show is how exposition heavy the dialogue is, to the point where it doesn't sound natural, which is a problem I had with the M. Night Shyamalan movie too. There's a lot of lore in this show, and the original show had a lot of exposition heavy scenes too, but they managed to make it sound more natural in the original. Here it kind of feels like instead of talking to the other characters, they're talking at the audience. They also have a problem with show don't tell. Originally we got flashbacks for Aang's backstory. It showed him playing with other airbenders and teaching them to do the air scooter, but when the monks are forced to reveal that he's the avatar early, the other kids start treating him differently, not wanting to play with him anymore because they think he brings an unfair advantage. So we get to see his life from before and after it was revealed that he was the avatar, and how that affects him. But here they tell us that he cares about his friends and he wants to have a normal life, instead of actually showing us any of this. We don't get to see him hanging out with other airbenders, just told that they're important to him, which just isn't impactful. I understand they only have 8 episodes, but there was a better way to display this information instead of just telling the audience about it. They condensed certain things in ways that I thought worked better for this show, like instead of dedicating an entire episode to the waterbending scroll, they had it be a gift from Gran Gran that Katara could study as she went. On the one hand, we are losing some of the characterization that came with that scroll, but it is only 8 episodes, so they have to make sacrifices somewhere, and I think this was handled better than the way they handled the backstories. There were some changes that they made that I did appreciate, like they added a scene for after Lu Ten dies, and the Fire Nation royal family is mourning his loss. Zuko has a moment with Iroh, where he reminisces about his cousin, and he gives Iroh a memento that Lu Ten originally gave to him. It's a very sweet moment, and I think does a good job at solidifying the bond between Iroh and Zuko. They also played Leaves from the Vine as background music, which was a really nice touch, especially since they didn't translate that scene to live action, but this was a good substitute. There were some changes I didn't care for though. Pretty much everything I was worried about when it came to the firebenders killing all the airbenders was justified. Sometimes when they make these remakes, they want them to be more mature than the original, and they think that adding sex and violence will achieve that goal. So when they said that they were going for the Game of Thrones kind of crowd, I was a little worried. Especially when they have scenes like Katara and Sokka going into the Cave of Two Lovers. Luckily all they do is hash out some issues they have, which I thought were some pretty good scenes, but why'd this have to take place in the Cave of Two Lovers? I'm just saying. Luckily there's nothing explicit or gratuitous, but they do show on-screen deaths, including the air nomads being wiped out, but I didn't think it was handled as well as it was in the original. Some people might argue that in the original it ended up being show don't tell, because we don't see the air nomads being killed and are only told about it, but there's a difference between turning to the camera and telling the audience something, and actually showing how impactful these events were, even if we don't see them specifically. When the gang arrives at the Southern Air Temple, we see the eerie silence, but also evidence of not only life here, but a battle. And it comes to a head when Aang finds the remains of Monk Gyatso, surrounded by the remains of a ton of Fire Nation soldiers. But here, even though we see him die, it feels less impactful. In the original, we see his remains surrounded by a platoon of soldiers, but here it's just a few guys. And Monk Gyatso knocks them back, but then he just gets burned alive. Not quite as dramatic as the cartoon, which implies that there was a huge battle, and they just find his remains lying in the middle of the hall. The whole scene just doesn't feel as impactful. I'm sure they thought that they showed this death on screen it would have more of a gut punch, but I really don't think it ended up adding anything. Overall, I just don't think Avatar: The Last Airbender needs a live-action adaptation. I also think the animation lended a lot of charm to the show, and I think it's missing that in this show. There's a lot you can get away with in animation that you can't in reality. That's what makes animation so fun. I did think the effects were decent, especially when compared to the Shyamalan movie, where they would have 5 people bend 1 stone. I did think there was a lot of child acting though, which I'm not gonna hold against them, they are kids, and I'm sure they'll improve with practice and time. I think I liked Zuko and Iroh the best, along with Sokka, but admittedly I thought Katara was kind of toned down compared to the original. Katara is the mother of the group, but she also has a lot of passion. She will yell at the others if she gets frustrated, but here she felt very calm. And even when she did get frustrated, she never reached the same level as she did in the animated series. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it feels very watered down compared to the original, no pun intended. There just wasn't enough here for me to really justify its existence. Probably just throw it onto the pile of disappointing remakes and move on. At least it wasn't offensive, but that's my opinion. What do you guys think? Did you enjoy this remake? Or do you think Avatar was fine the way it was and doesn't need a remake? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching everyone, I really appreciate it. Before I go, I want to give a shout out to the members: Tyrant Carnivore, Shiny Orc Boy, General Bolivar, Depth Charge Media, Samaru163, Gabby Hime, Verdant Range, JVR, Nixel, Phil C, Taylor Ramirez, Caleb Nelson, Dakari the Professor, Equestron, Norman Sweetcream, Way Beyond Coincidence, Hunter Rose, 80s Nostalgia Guy, Felix Bam, Soundboy00, Lucas Geist, J Draws, Blue Spirits, Meowsers, Sky, Jinke Z, Philip, Stutania, Isaac Martinez, Garcia XV Legend, Datadyne Executive, Kitsune Fiora, Tobias Weller, and Bandito Bane. Thank you all so much for your support. If you'd like to become a member, you can hit the join button next to the subscribe button. We also have a Buy Me Coffee if you want to support us that way. If you enjoyed the video, you can leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content. And that part's free. Thanks again for watching everyone, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.